April 14th, 1943, 24,000 feet over the North Sea, east of the English coast. The cockpit smells of hot oil, cold metal and fear. He sees a shadow flash across his canopy, the sharp rattle of machine gun fire punches. Holes through the air where his cockpit was a second earlier. The Spitfire jolts as fragments ping off the fuselage. Christ! He shoves the stick right and pulls back too hard. Too slow, a warning horn blares. Second Lieutenant Thomas "Tommy" Hale grips the control stick so tightly, his knuckles ache inside his gloves. The Merlin engine of his Supermarine Spitfire MKV howls at full military power, the vibration rattling through his boots and up his spine. The canopy is streaked with frost at the edges, sunlight flashing off the curved glass as the aircraft bucks in thin air. This is his first real fight. This is real. Tommy's mouth is dry. His heart hammers so hard it feels like it's throwing his ribs outward. 3 months ago he was still memorizing recognition charts in a classroom that smelled of chalk and damp wool. 2 weeks ago he was flying coastal patrols, scanning empty water and wondering if combat would ever feel real. Ahead and above, dark shapes slice through the blue, Messerschmitt Bf-109s, angular and fast, sun glinting off their wings. They dive through the Spitfire formation like knives, cannon fire flashing white and orange. Never bleed speed in a turn. Never dive steeply unless you've planned it. Altitude is life. Tommy reacts late. The aircraft responds sluggishly. The G-forces press him down into the seat, vision tunneling as the Spitfire claws around in a tight, panicked turn. The airspeed needle drops. 220, 200, 180. Not training. Not gunnery practice over the wash, not mock dogfights against friendly pilots who pull their punches and call "knock it off" before anyone gets hurt. The radio crackles in his headset, half-shouted warnings, clipped call signs, overlapping voices. Someone yells, "Bandits! 2 o'clock high!" Another voice curses as tracer fire streaks past. He is 18 years old. Now the sky is full of enemy aircraft. Tommy's instructor's voice echoes in his head, calm and precise as if spoken from another life. The squadron breaks formation. Aircraft scatter in tight, violent arcs, contrails spiraling like chalk lines in the sky. A Spitfire ahead of Tommy rolls hard left, corkscrewing downward with smoke trailing from its engine. Someone screams into the radio, then cuts off. But planning is impossible when everything is happening at once. The aircraft shudders on the edge of a stall, wings trembling, the controls turning soft and unresponsive. Tommy knows, he knows, that this is exactly how pilots die, slow, predictable, hanging in the air like targets. Another burst of fire snaps past. He catches a glimpse of a Bf-109 sliding into position behind him, nose steady, guns aligned. This is the moment instructors talk about in hushed tones, the moment when a rookie freezes or pulls the wrong way, or tries to outturn physics itself. Tommy panics. Instead of easing the stick forward, instead of rolling out and diving shallow like he was taught, he yanks the nose down hard. The horizon flips. The Spitfire drops into a steep, near-vertical dive. The engine screams as gravity takes over. Loose items in the cockpit lift against their straps. The altimeter unwinds so fast the needle blurs. Cold air howls around the canopy, the vibration turning violent. Every lecture he's ever sat through flashes through his mind at once. Never dive like this in combat. You'll black out. You'll compress. You'll never pull out in time. Tommy braces for impact. For the ground. For the sea. For the sudden hammer blow of cannon shells ripping through his aircraft. But it doesn't come. Instead, something strange happens. The firing stops. For a fraction of a second, just long enough to register, Tommy sees 2 dark shapes streak past his canopy. The Messerschmitts overshoot. They flash downward and forward, crossing beneath him in a blur of wings and propellers. Their pilots committed to the pursuit. Too fast, too close, unable to match the sudden change. Tommy's brain struggles to process it. They missed. The Spitfire is still diving, airspeed climbing past 400 miles per hour. The controls stiffen as compressibility sets in, the aircraft feeling like it's encased in concrete. The altimeter spins wildly, 20,000 feet. 18,000. Tommy forces himself to breathe. He eases the stick back with both hands, muscles straining, teeth clenched. The Spitfire groans, protesting, then slowly, agonizingly, begins to respond. The dive shallows. The sea rushes up, dark and endless, sunlight glinting off whitecaps far below. His vision greys at the edges as G-forces build again, but he holds it, riding the edge between control and catastrophe. Finally, the aircraft levels out. Tommy gasps, sweat soaking the inside of his flight suit despite the freezing altitude. His hands shake uncontrollably. The radio crackles again. "Blue 2, you alive?" It's his section leader, Flight Lieutenant Arthur Collins, voice tight with strain. Tommy swallows. "Blue 2, I'm still flying." There's a pause. Then, incredulously, "How the hell did you shake them?" Tommy looks back over his shoulder. The sky behind him is empty. The Messerschmitts are gone, either streaking past and away or breaking off to climb back toward the main fight. The moment is already slipping into chaos again, the battle reforming higher up. Tommy hesitates. "I don't know. I dove. Too steep. I thought I was dead." Collins doesn't answer immediately. Above them, contrails twist and intersect as aircraft claw for position. The fight is far from over, but something has shifted, subtly, invisibly. Because somewhere in that violent, panicked dive, an unwritten rule has just been broken, and for the first time, a young pilot has seen something enemy doctrine never accounted for. Speed used not to attack, but to force a mistake. Tommy doesn't understand it yet. All he knows is that a maneuver that should have killed him didn't. And that realization, hanging unspoken in the thin air over the North Sea, will not stay buried for long. The Spitfire steadies at low altitude, the engine's scream settling into a rough, breathless roar as Second Lieutenant Tommy Hale forces his hands to stop shaking. The fight isn't over, but for him something fundamental has changed. Tommy climbs cautiously, nursing the aircraft back toward the main engagement. The sky above is fractured into small, violent duels now, pairs of fighters circling, diving, snapping away from one another like angry insects. Black flak bursts blossom uselessly below them, far too low to matter. His radio is alive with confusion. "Red 3's hit. He's bailing out." "Bandit breaking left. Watch your 6. "Where's Blue 2? "I'm here," Tommy answers, voice thin but steadying, rejoining. Flight Lieutenant Collins spots him almost immediately. The older pilot's Spitfire slides into formation with practiced ease, wings rocking once in acknowledgement. "You look like hell, son," Collins says. "What happened down there?" Tommy hesitates, replaying the moment in his mind. The sudden loss of speed, the sickening drop, the blur of enemy aircraft shooting past his canopy. He can still feel the pressure of the dive in his chest. "I botched a turn," he admits, "stalled her nearly clean, panicked and shoved the nose straight down." "That dive should have killed you," Collins says flatly. "I know." There's another pause. Collins is watching the sky, but Tommy can almost feel his gaze anyway. Curious now, not critical. "And yet," Collins continues, "you're still here, and 2 Jerry fighters aren't." Tommy glances back again, half expecting the Messerschmitts to reappear. They don't. The engagement ends abruptly minutes later, as so many do. Fuel gauges dipping, ammunition counters blinking empty, pilots peeling away one by one. There's no victory formation, no triumph, just exhaustion and the quiet realization of who made it back. Tommy lands at RAF Coltishall with legs that barely support him. The Spitfire rolls to a stop, engine ticking as it cools, propeller slowing into stillness. Ground crew rush forward, scanning the fuselage for holes. There are none. That fact alone feels unreal. In the dispersal hut, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and adrenaline. Pilots speak in bursts, half laughter, half anger, as mugs of tea are shoved into trembling hands. Names are called. 2 don't answer. Collins stands at the center of the room, flight log in hand. His voice is steady, but his eyes are tired. When Blue Section was bounced from above, he says, Blue 2 broke hard right, lost speed, and then dove nearly vertical. A few heads turn toward Tommy, which, Collins continues, should have been suicide. Someone snorts, lucky bastard. Tommy feels his face burn. He opens his mouth to explain, but Collins raises a hand. Instead, Collins says, the enemy overshot, both of them, clean. The room quiets. That dive forced them to commit too much speed, Collins goes on. They couldn't pull their noses down fast enough without tearing their wings off. By the time they recovered, Blue 2 was gone. A senior pilot, squadron leader James Harrow, a veteran of the Battle of Britain, leans back against the wall, arms folded. Messerschmitt pilots hate losing the initiative, Harrow says slowly. They're trained to press an advantage once they've got speed. He looks at Tommy. How steep was the dive? Tommy swallows. Almost vertical, sir. A murmur ripples through the room. That's not in the book, someone mutters. No, Harrow agrees, because it's dangerous. Compressibility alone can kill you if you don't know what you're doing. I didn't, Tommy says quietly. I just reacted. Harrow studies him for a long moment, then nods once. Sometimes, he says, combat teaches faster than instructors ever can. The official report that evening is brief. It lists the encounter, the losses, the fuel states. Tommy's dive is noted as an unorthodox, evasive maneuver under pressure. No conclusions are drawn. But the story doesn't stay in the report. In the days that follow, word spreads through the squadron. Pilots corner Tommy in the mess, asking him to describe the dive again. How hard he pushed, how fast the aircraft went, how close he came to blacking out. He answers honestly. I thought I was dead, he says again and again. That honesty matters, because other pilots have felt the same fear, have been chased by faster aircraft, trapped in turning fights they can't win, watching their airspeed bleed away while enemy guns creep closer. They listen. One afternoon, Harrow calls Tommy into his office. A map of the North Sea is spread across the desk, marked with grease pencil lines and arrows. Sit, Harrow says. Tommy obeys, heart pounding harder than it ever did in the air. He expects a reprimand, a lecture, maybe a grounding. Instead, Harrow asks, what did the Germans do after they overshot? Tommy thinks. They kept going, didn't pull up right away. Why? They were too fast, Tommy replies. If they pulled up hard, they'd have blacked out, or worse. Harrow nods. Exactly. He taps the map with his pencil. Their tactics rely on maintaining energy superiority. They expect you to brake first. When you didn't, when you dove harder than doctrine allows, you forced them into a corner. Harrow leans back. That's not luck, Lieutenant. That's physics. The word hangs in the air. Physics doesn't care about doctrine. That night, Harrow writes a private memo, not to command, not to Air Ministry, but to 2 other squadron leaders he trusts. It describes an emergency escape maneuver based on sudden, extreme acceleration and vertical separation. He doesn't call it a tactic yet, but for the first time, something born from panic is being taken seriously. And for the first time since he climbed into a cockpit, Tommy realizes that surviving combat might not always mean doing everything exactly right. Sometimes it means doing the one thing the enemy never expects. The idea doesn't spread officially, it seeps. Within days, the story of Blue 2's dive becomes a low-voiced conversation, passed between pilots after flights, over tea, over maps smudged with oil and fingerprints. No one writes it on the board. No instructor stands up and endorses it. But questions start to change. Not how do I outturn a Messerschmitt, but how do I make him commit too much? Harrow begins quietly arranging test flights. Not demonstrations, those attract attention, but advanced handling refreshers scheduled during low traffic hours. He pairs rookies with experienced pilots, sends them up in twos, and tells them to practice disengagements under pressure. Tommy is always included. At first, he thinks he's being watched for mistakes. That one wrong move will end his career as quickly as it began. But after the third flight, Harrow pulls him aside on the tarmac. "You're not here to be judged," Harrow says. "You're here because you've already done it." Done what exactly? Tommy isn't sure. The experiments begin cautiously. High altitude, plenty of sky beneath them. One aircraft plays the pursuer, starting with an energy advantage. The other plays the hunted. The rules are simple. No firing, no sudden break-offs. The pursuer stays in position as long as he can. On the first attempt, Tommy flies as he was taught. Gentle turns, controlled dives, textbook maneuvers. The enemy sticks to him like a shadow. "Reset," Harrow says over the radio. On the second attempt, Tommy waits until the last possible moment, until the shadow fills his mirror, until his instincts scream at him to turn. Then he shoves the nose down. The Spitfire drops like a stone. The pursuer tries to follow. He can't. The closure rate is too high, the angle too steep. In seconds, the distance collapses, then reverses as the lead aircraft rockets away. The pursuer flashes past, helpless, forced to break off or risk structural failure. "Reset," Harrow says again, but this time his voice is different. Excited, they repeat the test, again and again. Different altitudes, different entry speeds, different aircraft weights. Each time the result is the same. If the dive is sudden enough, steep enough, and timed correctly, the attacker overshoots. But there are dangers. On the fourth run, Tommy pushes a fraction too hard. The controls lock up briefly as the Spitfire enters compressibility. The stick feels welded in place. For 3 terrifying seconds, the aircraft refuses to respond. "Easy, easy," he mutters aloud, easing pressure, waiting. The nose rises just enough. When he lands, his hands won't stop shaking. "That's why we don't teach it openly," Harrow says afterward. "One wrong input, 1 second too late, and you're dead." Tommy nods. "Then why are we practicing it?" Harrow meets his eyes. "Because being chased at low speed gets you killed just as surely." The technique begins to take shape, not as a single move, but as a sequence. Wait until the attacker is fully committed. Force closure. Use gravity, not turn radius. Trade altitude for survival. They don't give it a name. Names attract paperwork. But pilots begin recognizing the pattern. A Messerschmitt pilot, trained to exploit his aircraft's speed and climb, expects his prey to turn, to bleed energy, to make predictable mistakes. When the prey instead vanishes downward at impossible speed, the attacker has only bad options: follow and risk overshoot, blackout, or structural failure. Pull up and surrender position, level out and lose the fight. It's a momentary reversal of control. And it works best when the enemy is confident. Tommy listens as veterans begin adapting it in combat. One pilot describes using a partial dive, not vertical, but sharp enough to force a miss. Another talks about baiting an attacker into tightening his pursuit before dropping away. Each story is shared cautiously. No boasting, no official claims. Losses are still heavy. The sky in 1943 is unforgiving, and no maneuver is magic. But something subtle changes in the way young pilots talk about being hunted. They stop seeing it as the end. Late one evening, Harrow hands Tommy a folded sheet of paper. "Don't show this to anyone outside the squadron," he says. Inside are hand-drawn diagrams, simple lines and arrows, angles, speed notes, altitude margins. At the bottom, a sentence is written in pencil. "If turning will kill you, stop turning." Tommy stares at it. "I didn't mean to start any of this," he says. Harrow smiles thinly. "None of the useful things in this war were started on purpose." Weeks later, during another patrol, Tommy sees it happen again, this time from the other side. A German fighter latches onto a friendly Spitfire, guns flashing. The British pilot holds steady, then drops away sharply. The Messerschmitt overshoots, nose slicing through empty sky. Tommy doesn't fire. He just watches, because now he understands. The enemy hasn't made a mistake. They've followed their training perfectly, and that's exactly what's being used against them. By late summer of 1943, the maneuver has stopped feeling like a fluke. It still isn't official. It still isn't written down in any manual bearing an Air Ministry stamp. But it has become something else, understood. A shared instinct among pilots who have felt a Messerschmitt's guns creeping closer and realized that turning harder isn't the answer. Tommy feels the change most clearly in the questions new pilots ask him. Not what happens if I try it, but when is the right moment? That difference matters. On August 3rd, 1943, over occupied France, Tommy is no longer the hunted. He is the escort, flying high cover above a formation of B-17 flying fortresses, pushing toward a rail yard outside Amiens. Flak blooms below like dirty black flowers, and contrails braid the sky above the bombers. The call comes suddenly. Bandits, 6 o'clock low, multiple contacts. The Messerschmitts rise fast, sunlight flashing off their wings as they climb to meet the bombers. The escorts dive to intercept, the sky collapsing into a vertical battlefield. Tommy picks up a Bf-109 climbing hard beneath him, nose high, engine straining. He rolls in behind it, lining up the shot. Then something feels wrong. The German pilot doesn't brake. He doesn't turn. He doesn't climb harder. He waits. Too long. Tommy's airspeed is high, higher than he realizes. His closure rate spikes. The 109 suddenly drops its nose and vanishes downward. For a split second, Tommy feels the same panic he felt months ago. He's doing it. He hauls back instinctively, trying to follow, then stops himself. No, he breathes. He levels out instead, letting the German go. The realization hits him like a physical blow. The maneuver has crossed the lines. Not officially, not symmetrically, but knowledge in war doesn't need permission to travel. The enemy has learned something, just as the RAF did, through blood, observation, and survival. After the mission, the intelligence officer notes the encounter with raised eyebrows. Jerry broke contact in a vertical dive, he says. Unusual. Harrow, now listening from the back of the room, says nothing. But that evening the diagrams change. Margins are added. Warnings are underlined. The maneuver is reframed not as a last-ditch panic move, but as a deliberate energy trap, used sparingly, only when the attacker is fully committed. By autumn, variations appear. A shallow fake turn to bait pursuit. A delayed dive timed to coincide with gun convergence. A rolling entry to reduce compressibility effects. Each tweak is born from experience, not theory. Each is paid for by someone who didn't make it back. Tommy grows quieter as his reputation spreads. He doesn't like being known for the thing that nearly killed him. But he understands now that in aerial combat, survival knowledge is a currency more valuable than medals. In November, Harrow is called to group headquarters. When he returns, his expression is unreadable. They know, he tells the squadron that night. Someone upstairs has been listening. No names are mentioned, no credit assigned. But within weeks, a subtle change appears in advanced training syllabi. A new phrase is introduced during disengagement lectures. High-speed vertical separation. It is described cautiously, practiced only in controlled conditions, framed as an emergency option, not a standard tactic. But it is there. The maneuver that began as an 18-year-old's mistake has entered the bloodstream of fighter doctrine. Tommy is promoted to flying officer before the year's end. He pins on the new rank without ceremony, thinking of the pilots who never lived long enough to wear it. On his last flight of 1943, escorting bombers over Bremen, he watches a young pilot, barely out of training, execute the maneuver perfectly. The dive is clean, the timing flawless. The attacker overshoots and disappears. Tommy feels a strange mix of pride and unease. What saved him once is now being taught, which means others will try it without knowing fear. And fear, he knows, is what kept him alive long enough to learn. As the winter clouds close in over Europe, the air war grinds on. Aircraft improve, tactics evolve, but some truths remain unchanged. Speed is life, altitude is currency, and sometimes the only way out is down. By early 1944, the maneuver is no longer whispered, it is cautioned. That distinction matters. At operational training units, instructors now pause during lectures on disengagement. They lower their voices. They make eye contact with the youngest faces in the room, and they say carefully, "There is one option we don't recommend, unless you have no other." No one calls it by a name, but everyone knows which one they mean. Tommy, now a flight commander, sees the consequences firsthand. The maneuver works, but only when judgment matches courage. Too early, and the enemy simply follows. Too late, and compressibility steals the controls. Too shallow, and the attacker stays with you. Too steep, and the ground comes up faster than any lesson can save you. In February, a pilot from another squadron doesn't pull out. The report is brief. Aircraft entered steep dive during evasive action, failed to recover. Pilot killed. No mention of intent, no mention of influence. Tommy reads the report twice, then folds it and places it back on the desk. He doesn't speak about it that evening. War does not forgive partial understanding. The next time he briefs his own pilots, he changes the way he talks about it. "This is not a trick," he says. "It is not clever, and it is not bravery. It is a calculation." He draws 3 lines on the board: speed, altitude, distance. "If you don't know all 3, he says, tapping the chalk hard enough to snap it, "you don't do it." They listen. Some nod, some don't. In the air, lessons are learned faster and harsher. Over Berlin that March, the sky turns white with contrails and black with flak. Fighters swarm like hornets, attacking from every direction. In the chaos, a young pilot radios Tommy, panic rising in his voice. "I've got one stuck on me, he's not braking." Tommy doesn't hesitate. "Hold him, count to 3, then go." There's a pause. Then, "Going now." Tommy watches as the Spitfire holds steady for 1 heartbeat longer than comfort allows, then drops away in a clean, brutal dive. The German overshoots. The young pilot recovers, breathless but alive. "Good," Tommy says. "Now climb slowly." Later on the ground, the pilot approaches him, eyes wide. "I thought I was dead," he says. Tommy nods. "So did I the first time." That night, alone, Tommy writes a letter home he never sends. In it, he tries to explain how strange it feels to be alive because of a mistake, how something born from fear can become doctrine, how survival carries responsibility as heavy as guilt. He tears it up before dawn. By the time the Normandy landings begin, the maneuver has been absorbed into a broader understanding of energy fighting. It is no longer the answer, just one of several. Pilots learn to think vertically, to see the sky not as a flat circle, but as a stacked battlefield of speed and gravity. Tommy survives the war. Many don't. When the guns finally fall silent in 1945 after Germany's surrender, the RAF begins the long process of rewriting manuals, formalizing lessons paid for in blood. Buried in those documents is a section on emergency disengagements. The language is dry, clinical, safe. Nowhere does it mention an 18-year-old rookie. Nowhere does it describe panic or fear, or a moment when a young pilot broke every rule and lived. But the knowledge remains. Years later, as jet aircraft replace propellers and speeds climb beyond anything Tommy once imagined, the principle still applies. Force the enemy to commit. Control closure. Use gravity when turning will kill you. In a quiet archive, an old combat report still exists. Blue 2, April 14th, 1943, North Sea. It describes a mistake. History remembers a lesson.